You can't go to your CEO and be like, I'm going to go burn half of our enterprise pipeline for the next 6 quarters just to run an experiment. No one's going to agree to that. So because of that, you can't get true causality. For me, attribution is understanding the buyer's journey, understanding that life cycle. What are the things that you're doing that are common in the deals that close or have high conversion rates or the deal size you want, and go do more of that and be smart about making a decision of like, do I want to invest more here or not, with attribution as being one of those inputs to that process.
It's Attribution Nation time, where we look at attribution from multiple angles in a unique mini-series format. Our first 5 episodes are all about attribution history. Let's go! And in our first episode, we are joined today by Aaron Bird. Aaron was the co-founder and CEO of Bizible, which was acquired by Marketo in April of 2018. And then shortly thereafter, because they had just amazing attribution, they were acquired by Adobe. And Aaron is also the current CEO and co-founder of Inflection. And Aaron, is there anything else in your bio that you'd like to add on to that today?
No, I think that's great. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. I feel like this is like a conversation that's about 7 years in the making, considering I started working with Bizible 7 years ago. So yeah, really just thrilled to have you on the show today. So Aaron, I want to time travel. We want to go back to about 2011, 2012-ish, when you started the journey that turned into Bizible. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about where were you at the time? What were you doing? And what was the problem that you were solving that ultimately turned into Bizible?
Yeah, definitely. I'll try to give you the most condensed version of this. It's like the true story is, as always, so long. But we started the company in January of 2011, and at the time, so I had been at Microsoft working on their ad platform before that. And when we started, we had like 5 ideas that we liked that were all totally different, and I won't bore you the details of all of them. But anyway, one of them was a local marketing platform for small businesses. Okay. And if you go back far enough, Bizible, actually, the first Bizible product under that brand is actually a thing to help small businesses do marketing. So this is like painters and photographers to do digital marketing. Again, a much longer story to get into like how we did that and everything, but that was the first version. And we actually had customers and revenue, and we had a whole business that we launched around that. One thing that we did is that we had to build, we had this great, the marketing platform was actually really good. It worked really well. And we had, and our customers were seeing a lot of growth and success and revenue. And one question we were getting a lot is like, after we signed up, the phone's ringing a lot more, but how do we know it's you? How do we know it's Bizible? Like, how do we know where they came from? So we actually built this little attribution like feature, if you will, to prove that the marketing stuff was working. And it was a little bit different than the way that Bizible works today, or that Bizible 2.0 worked. But anyway, it helped like take digital marketing and show that it's actually leading to sales. And that business, we had a hard time scaling it. It's hard to sell to small businesses, like mom and pop businesses. And so we started to then figure out, how are we going to scale? And we had like 10 different ideas. And one of them was, what if we took this attribution product and went up market with it and just sold just attribution and not the whole marketing platform? And so that was the genesis of Bizible. We actually ended up, we had all the other ideas didn't really we tested all these things in parallel. The other stuff didn't work out. That was an obvious play. We actually had this pain point ourselves. So when we were acquiring these small businesses customers, we were doing digital marketing. We were using our own attribution that we had built for our customers to kind of like prove it out. And we were running AdWords and do all this kind of stuff. And so we knew this pain point firsthand as well. We're like, as a software company, not a local painter, we know we need this. And we had tried to buy other products in the market to solve it, obviously, because we had to adapt our internal version to fit our needs. And that took dev time, so I didn't want to do that. But so we had this pain ourselves, and we were kind of pivoting away from this other business that was actually doing well. It was just hard. It's just basically hard to sell to small businesses. And so we wanted to go up market. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. there was this other just really lucky, I think all success stories, there's a lot of luck involved, right? And I think one lucky just timing thing we had right as we started to offer this, Salesforce actually had this thing called Salesforce for Google AdWords. Okay. And they had bought this company in 2007, I think, that basically linked AdWords to Salesforce so that you could see AdWords kind of attribution on leads in Salesforce. And they had bought the company just to do that. They had actually integrated it. You could put this tag on your website and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this is all ancient history at this point, but some people may remember it. And it just so happened in the spring of 2012, right when we were pivoting, Salesforce announced that they were deprecating this product.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so and the product wasn't very good anyway. There weren't that many people using it. So obviously why they're deprecating it. But it was a link between Salesforce and AdWords. And so we lucked out there. We also lucked out because if you had this product, you had to put a tag on your website to make it work. So we built a web crawler. We crawled the web. We found every website, every domain that had that tag on it. And we scraped the website for every phone number on the website once we found the tag. And that was our lead list. And we actually did this before, like while we were building it. So we weren't approved by the App Exchange yet, but we just started calling in these guys and we're like, hey, we're a Salesforce partner. You're using a Salesforce feature that's about to be deprecated. It's going to stop working. And we have the solution. I need to talk to your Salesforce admin, and got routed to Salesforce admins and signed up. Like, it was crazy. Like, I remember we did our pipeline reviews on how many people are going to close this week. That was like, it wasn't this quarter, this month. It was literally this week. It was like, okay, these are the 10 deals that are going to close this week. And so it's just like, we were just closing just high velocity. Sometimes even one call closes. The sales team did an awesome job. We also were way under pricing. Anyway, I don't know how deep you want to go on all this, but we were charging $70, which is just month to month. Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah. So, and it was the early product, and it was very much focused on like digital ads, generating a lead in Salesforce, and just knowing where that like lead source and not just the word for lead source, but actually like UTMs and what ad and all this kind of stuff. So, but that was the first product. It was just like link digital ads with generating leads in Salesforce. And the reason why we focused on that was because the Salesforce product was getting deprecated, and we're like, this is just obvious, right? Like, we got to go into this.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So that's really interesting that your initial ICP was actually Salesforce admins. And then at some point in time, you shifted over to the marketing side of the house.
Yeah. Well, so the Salesforce admin was just a way to get in the door. Like, it was like we knew, and then they would then know who's using this thing. And so it wasn't, but we did have like early on, we used the App Exchange as a customer acquisition channel, and which is a lot of Salesforce admins that would go in there looking for stuff. So yeah, it was very Salesforce centric. And for people that know the early versions of Bizible, I mean, that's really where you did everything. It was like, we put these objects in Salesforce, you ran the reports there. And so, but yes, it was like Salesforce admins, and it depended on the size of the company and everything. But eventually, to like the point you're getting to, we kept asking just what's the real problem we're solving? What's the real problem we're solving? Right. And at first it was like, we're going to go solve this ads thing just because there's an opportunity right in front of us and it's obvious. Of course, we got in there and it was like, well, we talked to our customers. Well, what else are you guys doing? Oh, we're doing email, we're doing events, we're doing webinars. And like, okay, like, how are you measuring that? Well, we're not. Okay. So like it was pretty clear then for like 2012 to 2014 or something, 15 was just all about nailing all these other channels and figuring out what's the best way to get the data, whether it's integrating with existing sources or whatever, and so that you could have a whole picture of all of your B2B marketing.
Okay, cool. That's really interesting. I love that. I love how you saw this little opportunity, this little niche opportunity to get your foot in the door, and then just kept expanding and growing from there. That's super interesting. I love that. Now, when you were solving these problems, what was your definition of like, what is attribution at that time? Now, I know you and I have talked about what your definition of attribution is now, and I think there's some maturation there. But what was your definition of attribution, and what did attribution do at that time in your mind?
Yeah. Well, I think we had come out of the digital ad space, right? So my whole career before that, I was an engineer and then like a product leader focused on digital ad platforms. Okay. And so attribution in the digital ad space, which of course is dominated by B2C, really, like 9 out of 10 ads are B2C ads. It's a very much you're going for causality for as much as possible. Like you really are trying to attribute specifically, if I turn this knob, I will get this much revenue out of it directly, right? For most digital ads, you can get pretty close to that. And the reason why is because you're at the very bottom of intent, right? Like you're like someone goes to Google and searches for a 32-inch TV or whatever. It's like if you can be the ad that like actually draws their attention, you're very likely to get them to buy, right? It's a short sales cycle. It's at the end, right? For most of the time. It's not always the case, but most of the time. So, and then there's a lot of, in B2C, you can also run a lot of experiments, right? Like you have so much data, you can actually intentionally lose a very small amount of customers in an A/B test to then know what works so that I could go back and do more of that, right? So you have the luxury of having so much data that if you sell 500 TVs a month, you could miss 10 TVs next month such that you learn enough that you're going to make 30 more TVs the month after that because you're investing in the right spot. So A/B testing throughout the entire like funnel you can do in B2C because you have enough data volume. So anyway, when we started, it was very much about that. Like let's build something that's, goes after causality and goes after, if I do this, I will definitively get more of this. And if I just turn that one dial, I know for a fact, if I turn it 2x, I'll double, right? The classic like attribution definition of use case. And in B2C, you can get pretty close to that. It's still not perfect because you can't run perfect experiments, but you can run pretty good experiments and do it. So that's where we started because we were linking AdWords to leads in Salesforce. And a lot of our early customers also were like lead gen or highly transactional B2B, where they acted a lot like B2C in the sense that they had short sales cycles, high transaction volume, because obviously they came to us to measure the efficacy of online ads as a way to drive revenue. And so that by definition means that you probably have a shorter sales cycle or more transactional, or even there are B2C lead gen, like maybe 20% of our early customers were actually B2C high intent purchase, like lead gen, kind of like an insurance and stuff like that. So that's where we started. What we realized so first of all, there's a lot of great pure play B2C attribution companies back even in 2000, like Convertro and Adometry. In fact, there was this whole cycle of companies that were built in B2C. A lot of them got acquired and some of them measured TV, some of them measured ads, et cetera. So we definitely didn't want to go play in the B2C space. It was well trodden. There's good solutions out there. Even things like Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics, like Google Analytics bought Adometry and integrated that into their attribution. So we knew we wanted to stay with like B2B. And so we dug deeper and deeper into B2B. And as we got deeper, obviously we realized, okay, most of B2B, there's longer sales cycles. You can't do an entire A/B test. Like you can't just say, I'm going to take 50% of my pipeline and treat it completely differently from the first touch all the way to close one and like you could in B2C. And so I think kind of what you're getting at is I think the value that we ended up really providing, and I think what attribution in B2B is really best used for is to understand where are your good deals coming from, see the full life cycle, right? Being able to visualize and understand what is the entire customer life cycle of buying and what are the touch points. And in each of those stages, what touch points seem to be working for the kind of buyers that we want to find more of? And then what are the things that maybe aren't working for the ones that we want less of, right? And so it's not so much about, at the beginning, we went down the path of what you think about a lot about like your mission statement and stuff like that, right? And I think we were like, what if we could have marketers get compensated off of the revenue they drive, like a sales rep? Like we went in that stage early and realized that in B2B, that's just it's not the right path to go down. You don't like the credit, like who gets credit or what channel gets credit is not, you can't run the type of experiments you'd need to run because they're too hard to run because the sales cycle's too long, the sales and marketing cycle's too long. And B, you can't go to your CEO and be like, I'm going to go burn half of our enterprise pipeline for the next 6 quarters just to run an experiment. Like I'm going to A/B test it, right? No one's going to agree to that. So because of that, you can't get true causality. And so I think for me, attribution is understanding the buyer's journey, understanding that life cycle. What are the things that you're doing that are common in the deals that close or have high conversion rates or the deal size you want, and go do more of that and be smart about making a decision of, do I want to invest more here or not, with attribution as being one of those inputs to that process.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that tracks a lot with the way that I view attribution, because when I'm working with a Marketo measure, visible customer, first off, we are not talking causality here at all. We are talking what are the things that are related to these opportunities. And a lot of times I use an analogy of, we're telling the story about how a deal came to be, right? Like we want to tell the entire story. And each touch point is a chapter along that story. And different buyers are different characters in each chapter, right? And some play more prominent roles and others play lesser roles, right? And so I think it's the ability to tell that narrative, and then at each individual deal, you have the ability to tell the narrative and story for that deal, but then you can also aggregate it up and see which chapters tend to be the most important for the best performing stories, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I think I agree. Yeah, I think I agree with you quite a bit there.
Yeah, as a CEO, when I think everybody, board meetings, right? If you have a good deal that comes in, right, and maybe it's a promising one that's at the bottom of the pipeline, or maybe it's one that's closed, what's one of the first questions that just about everybody asks? Wow, that's an awesome deal. How did we get it?
How we get it?
Like, where did they come from? How did they find us? What were they wanting? Why did they buy from us versus our competitors? These are like really important questions. And if you can answer those questions, you're likely going to be able to go find more of those. That doesn't mean that, because they came in on a webinar, you should, stop doing in-person events and take all your budget and put it on webinars. Like that's obviously not going to work, right? Or it doesn't mean if the demand gen team did it, then you should like fire all your SDRs, right? It's like, okay, that's not going to work either. But knowing how they came in, if you go do more of that, you're going to find more people like that, right? And be smart about the investment. So I think that's that story and being able to answer those questions. And it's interesting. Obviously, Bizible or Marketo measure at this point is like attribution is what people think of it as. I think there was a point where I thought about changing how we position ourselves to just be like visibility into the buyer journey, right? And I feel like that's a much better description. It's not as, it's a little bit more wordy and everything, and it doesn't have a category kind of definition, but I feel like that's a much better representation of what B2B attribution really does and the value proposition that it provides.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree for sure. Now, you just mentioned this about as a CEO and a CMO, where you make your investments and being smarter about your investments, which is a perfect segue into where I wanted to go next, which is you have this mindset as a CEO that's your investor mindset about where you spend your money. Can you kind of share that with our listeners here?
Yeah, definitely. I think of go-to-market investments, whether it's sales, marketing, all of it, all of customer acquisition, just like an investor in the stock market or an investor in real estate, or pick your favorite asset class. I think of it as you can go, the term buy the market, right? So you can go buy the S&P 500, all right? Like, and that's what, like Warren Buffett will actually tell you to go do that. It's like, if you pick stocks, you're less likely to be successful. Just go buy the market. Don't try to be too smart, right? So you can go buy the market, which is buying the S&P 500, and then you can forget about it and not spend any time on it, and you'll get market returns. You'll get kind of like what everybody else is getting because you bought the market. If you do that in go-to-market, then same thing. If you just go do what everyone else is doing, you're going to get what everyone else gets. And that's not what you want. Obviously, you want to win. You want to beat your competitors. You want to go faster than everyone else. And the only way to do that is to make investments that are smarter than your competitors. Just like in the stock market, right? If you're happy with just getting the same return that everyone else gets, then great, go do that. And now the consequence of doing this in business is much worse than the consequence of doing it in investing, obviously, right? If you just go, if there's 10 competitors in a market and you go and you just buy the market or do what they're doing, then you're going to end up in fifth place on average, and fifth place doesn't get paid, right? So for me, making the right investments in customer acquisition is like super critical to winning as a business. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to do things other people aren't doing, right? You have to become a stock picker. You have to go and analyze and figure out where are the underserved opportunities. And again, Warren Buffett will also tell you if you're going to go stock picking, you should go after value investing, and you should find opportunities that are underserved that other people don't know about, and then you invest them in them, and they beat the market, right? And so you have to do that and go to market as well. If you just go and you go do what most B2B companies do, which is like do content marketing and do events, do some field events, et cetera, do webinars. Not to say you shouldn't do those things, but if that's the only thing you do, then you're just going to get the same returns and you're not going to win, right? You'd have to then find something else. You have to raise 10 times more than your competitors and then just outspend them or something like this, right? And that's obviously not a great strategy. So I'm a big fan of finding investments that are underserved, things that other people aren't doing. So as an example, at Bizible, we did this thing called Fast CMO.
I was going to ask you to share this. I was going to ask you to go here. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I can't take credit for it. Dave Rigotti and his team came up with this. And one thing I'll say before I get to this actually is there's a saying in startup land that great startups are good ideas that look like bad ideas, okay, as an investor, which again goes back to this idea of finding alpha in a market. If something was obviously a great idea, everyone would do it. And if everyone was doing it, then it would just be buying the market and get market returns, right? And so you have to like go after things that on the surface, everyone else passed up because it looked like a bad idea, right? And so I think one thing when, as a CEO or when you're looking at different ideas, if your team brings something to you and it's like, that looks like a bad idea, how do you test it? Find a way to test it, because 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 bad ideas are actually going to be good ideas. And that's where or things that look like bad ideas will be good ideas. And that's where you're going to find alpha, or that's where you're going to be able to beat your competitors. So Fast CMO is an example of this. So the team came to me and they were like, we want to do like a hybrid kind of podcast and create a high gloss, really thick, awesome, big magazine out of these interviews on this podcast. And we want to go and interview CMOs and do this, right? And I was like, I don't know this. And this was at the time when like podcasts were kind of blowing up, and I'm like, everybody's doing a podcast. Like, why? So, but again, I was like, all right, let's try it. Let's just go see it and see if it's going to work. And it actually ended up being amazing. And so what we did, again, we tested, we refined, and the end result for Fast CMO was what we would do is and we actually had a button using Sendoso. We had a button in Salesforce where our SDR could hit a button and the CMO of that company would get this high gloss, like 100-page color, every page is color, really, really nice magazine. It was bigger than a normal magazine with like kind of hardbound. It was like really high quality publication called Fast CMO. It'd have someone's face on the cover, and it was just full of CMO interviews and things that they had done that had worked and tricks and tips and stuff like this, right? And so they hit a button and that would get delivered to the CMO's desk. And when it landed on their desk, the SDR would get a notification so that they would then send an email and a call and say like, hey, I realized it just showed up at your desk. So first of all, one thing, and everybody's figured this out since then, and Sendoso and others have built good businesses off this, but when you send something like that to someone's work pre-COVID, it would actually show up at their desk at work, right? Like it would be literally like on their laptop when they came in the morning because it would get routed there, right? And so it was like this amazing real estate opportunity. Like their email has 50 emails no one's read, and then you're the thing sitting on their laptop when they arrive. And so they'd see this Fast CMO, they're like, oh, cool. And then of course they get an email and a call from an SDR. And then what they would say is, we just sent you a copy of Fast CMO. We want to interview you and put your face on the next cover of the next one, right? And CMOs love to see their face on things and be promoted and stuff. So it's like, oh, sure, let's play to their ego, right? And so the conversion rate on that was amazing, right? And it'd be like, Aaron, our CEO, wants to do a 1-hour interview, and we would do that, obviously. And then we'd interview them, and we'd get great. These are amazing interviews, actually. Like they would tell us so much great stuff about what. It was always like, what's the one thing that's just amazing that your team's doing? And they'd always have something, and we just go deep on it, right? And that's fun, and it's great content for other CMOs. And of course, I'd spend like 10 minutes at the beginning of the call, like basically doing a visible discovery call with them. So what do you guys, what's your stack? What do you guys, how are you measuring marketing, right? Blah, blah, blah. And of course, the SDRs taking all the notes, and then we'd follow up. And again, the conversion rate from the podcast to a sales call with that CMO was like super high as well. And then we would then take all that content, we would put their face on the cover. We would print 50 of that version of Fast CMO, send it to them so their whole team could see it and everything, right? And so we just had a stack of Fast CMO, like different people on the cover of Fast CMO, right? Like if you talked to me, you ended up on the cover of Fast CMO of like some episode of the magazine, right? And we made sure that you and your team had plenty of it. And then we had a whole content plan around this, like good B2B marketers do. We're going to recycle all this content. We're like, okay, we're going to create a book from all these insights. We actually, I don't even think we ever launched the podcast. Like we did these interviews, printed these books, and then it was like disco, sales call. Okay, who cares? We don't even need to do an actual podcast here. This whole thing is working. And we were going to do a book, and we actually started it, and then we sold the company. But so anyway, so a long-winded example of like, that who else was doing that? No one was doing that, right? And it just worked like magic because no one was doing it. Now, the key is to like go test, right? Like it's like we tested many things along the way to make sure that was going to be a good idea, because most things you try aren't going to work because there's a reason why no one's doing them. But there are diamonds in the rough there, right? And so I think it's important to experiment with crazy stuff that seems like a bad idea, like printing a high gloss magazine and sending it to someone.
So I've got to ask this question. So that is an insane idea. I love that Dave came up with that idea, but it's absolutely insane. So how does a CMO or another marketing leader bring a crazy idea like that to you, the CEO, and get you to buy into that? Like, how do I get you to invest in either a crazy idea like that or just like something that I need to do more of? Like, how do I get that? How do I get you to approve that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would start with the thesis of we have to find alpha. So in the investment community, alpha means that you've found an investment opportunity that's going to exceed market returns, right? The alpha is the difference between your returns, your risk adjusted returns, and the market's risk adjusted returns. So you have to basically pitch, I think, first that, like, look, here's what the competitors are doing, all right? And this is what their customer acquisition cost is. Do you want us to just go do that? We'll do the same thing. We'll get the same result, and we'll just be average. Yeah, that's what we can do. Or we can take 30% of our budget and try a bunch of stuff to try to go find a way to get above market returns, right? We're going to go stock picking, right? And what that means is that we have to experiment, we have to test, we have to try things, obviously. We have to go down some pathways that are going to lead to dead ends. And so I think you got to get the team to buy off on this idea of some percentage of our budget is going to be just purely experimental from a demand gen perspective to go find customers. And the example that I gave for Fast CMO is a demand gen example, but it could be that it's actually not the top of the funnel that's the problem. Maybe it's conversion rates throughout the funnel, or it's your sales cycle is too long. But whatever that problem is you're trying to solve, again, there's a above market return opportunity to go try some crazy things to solve it. So if I was a CMO, the first thing I would do is try to get the board and the CEO just aligned on, are we willing to experiment? And that means burning money, by the way. Like, we're going to take money that's going to result in zero, right? Like, we're using Bizible, obviously, to measure everything. And so there's going to be stuff that's going to be not worth anything in the process of running these experiments, right? Like, they obviously have to buy into the cost side of it, not just the benefit side. But I would first get them on the same page with that. I think it would be hard for a board to say, we want you to go do what everyone else is doing and get the same results.
That would shock me. Yeah.
Like, I would force them to say that, be like, you get two choices. Either do what everyone else is doing and get the same results, or experiment and in the process burn a little bit of cash while we're experimenting, right? You pick, right? And I think, so get that. And then it's like, okay, well, how much of my budget do I have to experiment, right? Let's get that figured out. And then now you've set the table, right? And then now you got to like perform though too. You got to find those opportunities. And I do think to do that right, testing is really important. don't get sold on an idea and then go do the whole thing before you see results, right? Like you've got to kind of test along the way to make sure that it's going to work before you go all in on doing the whole thing.
So you have to build an off ramp, right? So like if we're seeing that we aren't seeing leading indicators, we got to have an off ramp to get off this thing. Yeah. Okay. I
Exactly.
love that. I love
Like
that.
do measured investments along the way to test, right? Like you do with most things.
Yeah, yeah. So with this fast CMO concept, when Dave brought this to you and pitched this to you, did you get involved in some of the ideation behind it? Like, did you say, "Hey, I like this, but maybe we can tweak it and do this, this, and this a little bit differently," or was it more like, "Go run with it"?
It was mostly them. So the first, we iterated on it, right? Which is, I think, critical. The first thing they came to me with was, let's do a podcast called Fast CMO. And I was like, it was when podcasts were like blowing up. And I just was like, I don't know if I want to just do a podcast. And so then that was my feedback. Like, either sell me on podcast more or morph this thing. And then they came back with this idea of the magazine. And I was like, okay, that seems, nobody's doing that. So like that kind of, I was attracted to the idea of, I mean, magazines are almost dead, right? It's like, who's publishing magazines these days? And so I like that idea of like, okay, this is something that no one's doing. And so then they came back with more and more but it was it was all their ideas and everything. And I was just more like directionally, I like this, I don't like this. And then we experimented with the magazine. We created one that was a lot smaller and then sent it out, booked a meeting. Oh, okay, this is starting to work.
I gotta say, so I've worked in an organization that had magazines, and that is I gotta give you guys credit because I know the investment in money and time that it takes to create a magazine. That's a huge investment to get a magazine out the door. It really is. So that was a huge risk, really.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, it's people, it's writing, editing, design and layout, and then production. I mean, you pick out the paper, the type of paper that goes into the magazine. Like that's a huge investment. That's a huge risk. And now somebody that's listening to this is probably going to reinvigorate magazines and do something similar, and that's just awesome.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're right. It was a big investment. It's still measured. Like we knew, okay, this is, for the first one to get an interview going, it's going to cost X amount of hours and X amount of dollars, right? And you're going to hit those decisions, right? Where you can't just iterate your way from a dollar here and a dollar there. So there is always these big chunks. But I think that's part of what you have to do. Like another big bet we made at Inflection was this event, PLGTM. So, and again, Dave came up with this, who's running marketing at Inflection now and was running marketing at Bizible before. And it was like coming out of COVID, we're like, let's do an event, an in-person event. Like, let's get people back. Again, it's like no one was doing that. And so that's turned out to really work too. And another big bet though, it's like we did it in person, a full day in New York with like 150 people. That was like step one of PLGTM a year and a half ago. And so and it worked out.
Yeah, and that's another one that's just a huge bet because the time and energy and investment into that's just massive. So
yeah,
again, kudos for taking those big of a risks. That's huge. Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into where I wanted to go next, which is let's get to the present day. You're CEO of Inflection. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So it's next generation marketing automation. So you think about the last kind of how the marketing stack's evolved over the last 20 years, really. The big change in not just marketing, but in go-to-market in general, in my view, is the rise of the data warehouse. And you have a ton of first-party data, whether it's product data or transactional data, all of this. Snowflake built an amazing company and a big IPO off this exact trend. At Bizible, we saw this early on. Actually, like our attribution data, some of our really early adopter, very advanced customers were taking our attribution data and actually putting it into data warehouses. And that's the only thing they used it for. They did their own reporting. They didn't use it in Salesforce. They didn't use the UI in Bizible at all. And so we actually had kind of a front row seat over the last kind of 15 years to this evolution of all this first party data and what you can do with it. And so Bizible, we saw people taking our attribution data and doing marketing with it, and like using it to enhance their marketing. And this was actually a vision with like where I thought this could go with Marketo through the acquisition. And then after Bizible sold, I ran product at Marketo. And again, it was just right in my face where all these Marketo customers were starting to stand up data warehouses or CDPs or whatever, this data store for all of your first party data, but they couldn't action off of it. They could see it in Tableau, they could see it in Power BI, but they couldn't actually enable marketing with it, right? And so that's what Inflection does. It's as if Marketo was connected to your entire Snowflake instance and had all of that data in the lead database. And that's what we set out to build 3 years ago. We've targeted initially on like the product-led market, because if you're a product-led company, that product data is gold in talking to the right person with the right message at the right time. And so in PLGTM is the conference that we've built for go-to-market professionals in the PLG world. And yeah, and it's exciting. It's fun. Like it's fun to be the one thing at Bizible. Like I loved building Bizible. And it was just an amazing opportunity. The one thing though, like we helped people measure marketing, but we never helped them do marketing. And the one thing that the whole time because we focused on measurement, it was like I had visions of how could we enable using all of that to do better marketing and actually operationalize it and build campaigns. But it's hard. You're always focused on the one thing in front of you and like making that better. And so it's fun to be on the helping people do marketing. I think there's way more leverage that we can provide to marketers by helping them actually do marketing than just measure it. And so, yeah, so it's exciting. It's really fun.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. And I think most of our listeners will know what PLG stands for, but PLG standing for product-led growth, just in case there's a listener out there that doesn't know that understand the acronym. So now with Inflection, do you have any kind of attribution adjacent or related features in there, or you doing anything like that with Inflection now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're actually the release we're working on right now, we're going to be adding some basic attribution features. We'll never get to the point where we'll build everything that Bizible has around attribution, or at least not for the foreseeable future. I do think if you want to go that deep, it's best to buy a solution for it. That's true for a lot of things. Obviously, a lot of our customers want kind of a surface level attribution. We don't have that today, and so we're adding it. We'll have touch points for the kind of key milestones, and you'll be able to measure all the kind of same stuff you do with Bizible for each of those touch points. If you want to do like multi-touch revenue attribution, then buying something like Bizible or something else is probably the right thing to do. But yes, we're adding attribution, and when we're adding our own JavaScript tracking for your website to be able to tag all the kind of stuff, that kind of stuff. So it's fun to be at that again and kind of knowing exactly what to build and where the sweet spot is.
Oh yeah, you're not going to make all the same mistakes you made back in 2013, right?
That's right. Exactly.
You get to just skip all that stuff and get right to the good stuff. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, so if I were a PLG company, which obviously I'm not, I'm a services company, but if I were a PLG company, the big thing that PLG companies need to do is convert people from whether it's a freemium model to a paid model or a base model to a higher tier model. How would you recommend PLG organizations approach the attribution struggle that they're going to have? Because ultimately, most orgs are not putting Bizible inside a product, right? They're just not. Doesn't mean you can't. It just means that most orgs aren't. They're keeping it more so on the acquisition side versus the post-acquisition conversion side. So it's a unique challenge that PLG orgs have. So what would you say is a way to approach that?
Yeah, I think there's two very different stages here. I think there's there's getting someone into your product. Okay. And I'll just call that, for lack of a better term, top of the funnel. Okay. And so if you're a product-led growth company, you might even have a free forever product, right? And so you have a bunch of users probably that are using your product for free, and you still want to probably get more of those free users, right? So again, top of the funnel in that case would be, how do I get people to sign up for the free account? Okay. Once they're signed up, let's call them a customer, even though they may not actually be paying you, right? So you could break the world into top of the funnel, and then taking customers, or just in general, people using your product, and getting them to adopt your product more. Okay. Which in PLG, product adoption leads to more revenue. Like that's how you, and it's true for actually most companies in general, but that's the name of the game in PLG, is to first get them into your product, and then just get them to use it more and more and more. They'll see more value, they'll pay you more, or they'll move from free to paid, or they'll go from paid and expand, or cross sell, et cetera, right? So those two worlds are different. I think for top of the funnel, you can definitely use something like Bizible, or like the attribution stuff that we're building at Inflection, or HubSpot and others have kind of their own basic attribution for top of the funnel. And so if you're a PLG company, top of the funnel attribution really is no different than any other B2B company. It's the same, it's all the same stuff. Once they're in your product though, now you want to drive product adoption, okay? And you could still say that there's attribution there, because it's like, okay, what are the things I do to get them to adopt the product more? The goal is different. It's not product sign up or conversion, but it's actually like invite another user, or run another report, or connect another connector, whatever those things are along the product adoption journey that gets people to use the product more and get more value out of it. So you could still think of that as attribution, but the inputs are way different. The most important input is no longer how they interacted with your marketing and sales. It's what are they doing in your product, and not just that person, but the account, right? So you might have, like, the goal might be to get the admin to go run a report or something like that, right? Or it might be to get the users to chat more within the app or something like this, right? And so the way you drive more product adoption is you look at what are the things I need them to do that are going to get them to that next milestone, right? And so all of that, basically customer marketing that you're doing and all that communication, you can do attribution around, but the inputs aren't marketing. The inputs aren't how they interact with your marketing, but rather what do they do with your product. And so you can send them email and say, hey, go take this next step in the product, and give them an offer on why, or give them we love this idea of, like, once someone does something and gets value, then remind them of the value they just got, and then ask them to do the next step and help them do the next step, give them a video or whatever. And so that kind of marketing is what you're doing, but the goal is to drive more product adoption and to get them to the next step of the product.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, it's no longer advertising, right? You're not advertising to somebody on AdWords and LinkedIn to go use this feature of the product. It's a completely different form of marketing. It's still marketing, but it uses different tools and communication vehicles. And yeah, so you got to completely change how you're tracking that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So, Aaron, I got one last question for you. This was just completely off topic, but I came up to the Bizible office, I think twice before you were acquired by Marketo. And both of the times I went up there, I loved the culture of the office. I loved the culture of the company. Just every time I went up there, it was just a great experience. One of the best cultures I've ever seen in an organization. So what would you attribute that to?
Well, thanks. First off, I appreciate that. I think that, I don't know, I think really just listening to employees and really understanding what do they want, what makes them productive, how are things going. I think a lot of that gets lost as companies get bigger, and it doesn't make its way to the leaders at the company. And so finding ways to make sure you've got your ear to the grindstone on what's going on day to day with everyone. So like when we sold the company, we had 150 employees, and I still, up until then, was doing one-on-ones with everybody in the company. Now, some of those were like every 6 months or something like this. Like I kind of, depending on the organization or the function and various things, I kind of had this like math about like how often I'm going to meet with people, but I still wanted to hear from folks. We also used like Tiny Pulse, this like thing to get everyone's feedback on how happy they are and all this kind of stuff. So I think just getting feedback from the organization constantly and making sure that that makes its way to the exec team in a unfiltered, transparent view, I think that was something that was really important to me, and also I think helped me make sure that we kept the culture that we wanted.
I love that. I love that. I mean, to be able to do that at that size and scale is insane. I do monthly one-on-ones with my team, but I mean, I only have 3 employees, so it's really easy to do. But at that size and scale, that's really impressive. So, I mean, just yeah, kudos to you. I think I still talk to a lot of former Bizible people. I hired one, Tom Fast. He works for us, and he's fantastic. And I think that it seems it's a badge of honor for them that they worked there, and I think that just speaks volumes to the culture that you had there. So I think you did a great job with that.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It was definitely something we thought a lot about, and we're really intentional. And I think I'm we got to 150 folks. I always kind of wondered, I'm like, how are we going to maintain this as we get to 1,000 or 5,000? And so I think that's another chapter in the book that hopefully we'll write here with Inflection. And I think that's hard to do. It's hard to keep doing that. So I think there's probably some interesting solutions there, but I'm excited to solve those problems.
Well, I hope you run into those problems to solve. Those are great problems to have to solve for. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, I want to just do like a quick little recap before I let you run, Aaron. I want to just do a quick little recap of what I think are some of the key takeaways that I've heard throughout our conversation today. Number one, attribution is really used in 2 ways. Number one, to understand that customer journey so that we can figure out who our best customers are, and then what did they interact with on their journey to becoming a customer, so that we can do more of the stuff that led to the best customers. And then also, I think that just trying to not necessarily find causation, but to find those little items that are, hey, this thing keeps popping up. Like maybe we need to look into that more often. Another thing that I think came out of this is experimentation is just really, really key. I mean, that Fast CMO magazine idea is just so out of left field, but it obviously worked wonders. And so being able to find those things there that your competition isn't doing, because that's where you find that alpha, as you referred to it. Another thing that came out of this that I think is just brilliant is just how to get your CEO to invest in more stuff, whether it's CEO or CFO. If you're a CMO or demand gen leader or a marketer that wants to do something more or do more of something or do something really experimental like Fast CMO, is to kind of talk to them like an investor. Talk to them like, hey, if you want to do, I loved your example of go to the board and say, hey, if you want to get the exact same results as our competitors, just let me do the same stuff they're doing. Is that what you want me to do? That's brilliant, because then you either get permission to do just the bare minimum or you get permission to get experimental and do some crazy stuff. And then the last piece is really actioning on the data that you have, and how can you turn data into action that allows you to again, do more of the stuff that works and do less of the stuff that doesn't work. So Aaron, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining here today. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, it's kind of like a full circle moment for me, because again, our paths crossed back in 2017, and Attributo wouldn't exist if Bizible hadn't existed. So thanks for spending the time with me, and just really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Drew. It was super fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and connect with me on LinkedIn, and let me know there if you'd like access to our private group where we keep these conversations going. On our next episode, we'll be talking with Lars, the CEO of Dream Data, who explains how to empower org-wide creativity despite, get this, not being able to measure it, and why every company should have a marketing co-founder. Hope you'll listen.